Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the very first Global Coffee Town Hall. We hope this will become an annual event. This is really exciting. Everything that could have gone wrong with my audio has gone wrong and my microphone just fell. So awesome. Let's get it all out of the way in the beginning. This is a really exciting event. This started as the Sydney Coffee Town Hall and then became the Aussie Coffee Town Hall and has now become the Global Coffee Town Hall. There are over 100 people that have registered to be a part of this event on YouTube and here on Zoom. And I anticipate that there are going to be a lot of people coming in and out of the conversation over the next couple of hours. My name is Lee Safar, for anyone who doesn't know me. If you haven't checked out our podcast, go ahead and check it out. If you have checked out our podcast, you'll know that I am somebody who is all about open, honest communication where we don't skirt around the subjects that need to be discussed. And this is yet another opportunity for us to come together and do that. Today, we kick off 4 events in 4 different languages asking one question. What needs to change in the coffee industry in 2021 and beyond? And it's a really poignant question, especially given the things that have happened in the last 24 months when it comes to all the challenging things we're experiencing, whether it be the pandemic, whether it be climate change, whether it be logistical issues, all of the things that are ahead of us as an industry all revolve around this idea that we can't keep doing things the way that we have been doing them this past couple of decades. And so I invite everybody today to take in a deep breath of courage and say what needs to be said and what's on your mind. We are not an industry that typically does that kind of thing. This is absolutely the forum to do that. So before we get started, I want to give a massive shout out to the 3 businesses who generously made this event possible to attend for free. And that is Baratza, Los Pirineos, and CoffeeNet. In coming up with the idea of this event, it was important to me that everybody's voices get represented in a way that they can best communicate that. A lot of the time that means inviting people who wouldn't be able to afford to attend if they had to pay. And so making this event for free, available across the 4 different languages, English, Spanish, Arabic, and in Portuguese, means that we all get insights into the different ways that different communities across our supply chain would answer those questions. And so each of the conversations is going to be translated into 10 different languages through the subtitles on YouTube. And I would encourage everyone moving forward beyond the events that are going to happen over the next week. I would encourage you to go and watch those conversations with the subtitles to hear what particularly people who occupy a different part of the supply chain and the value chain than you do, what they have to say. This is a truly unique opportunity for us to hear that in their voices in an open forum discussion. So my hopes for the goal of the Global Coffee Town Hall over the next week is, as I said, that we approach this very poignant question with honesty and openness and hopefulness. There are a lot of challenging things happening, but there is a lot of hope for people who come from the perspective of wanting to solve problems. And that's very exciting because there are a lot of problems that need to be solved. I hope that we hear each other and we come with the intention of being heard. If there are any people who show up through the discussion, and I'm looking at you, YouTube, if people do show up and have the intention of trolling, no problem. We have already built into the system how we will take care of those situations. We don't encourage trolling. We do encourage vigorous debate. There are going to be people who disagree with each other, and that's absolutely perfect. We can't solve anything if we don't debate things. So let's explore the ideas respectfully together. ignite discussion. And if you haven't had the opportunity to follow us on Instagram or follow us on YouTube, please consider doing that. It really means that we can have the ability to communicate with you and send through all the content and the ideas that come through on this discussion. It is my great privilege to present this conversation with the fabulous Madeleine Longoria Garcia. Madeleine is joining me here today now, and I'm going to hand over to Madeleine to kick off today's event.
Thank you, Lee, and aloha everyone. My name is Madeleine and I am based in Hawaii. I am the co-owner of a company called Pacific Coffee Research on Hawaii Island, and I've worked in various roles in the coffee industry for the last about 11 years now. And what I mean by that is I have worked on coffee farms and I have worked in cafes and roasteries. So a lot of different roles in there. And I also just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today for this discussion. As Lee has said, this whole conversation is around the central question of what needs to change in the coffee industry in 2021 and beyond. And we use the words discussion and conversation because this 2-hour event is meant to be a true town hall event. Lee and I are here as moderators to ensure that the conversation moves along and moves forward. And while we will be participating in the conversation, we're not here to present our own ideas or our own solutions. We want this to be a communal event where we are virtually passing the mic along to individuals here. So with that, if you do have a response to share to this question, we ask that you use the raise hand option on Zoom, and that can be found on the bottom of your screen under the reactions menu. If you can't find that option, please use the chat to signal to us that you would like to contribute something, and we will hand the mic off to you and make sure that you have the opportunity to do so. We'll call on folks individually, and we ask that when you do present something, if it's your first time speaking, that when you unmute yourself, to just introduce yourself. Tell us what your name is, where you're joining us from, what you do in the coffee industry, or whatever other kind of thing you'd like to share before presenting your topic or your conversation point. We will explore topics as thoroughly as we can once they're presented to the room. And we also ask that everyone just respect each other as they're speaking. We don't want people to talk over each other. We want this to be, again, passing the mic as much as we can on a virtual format. And then for everybody who's joining via YouTube, if you would like to present something, Lee and I are both monitoring the live chat happening there. And so we will voice the topic or the conversation that you'd like to bring up to anybody who contributes those topics in the live chat. And Lee, I think we're going to do a little test, right?
Yeah. So just to make sure that everybody knows where the raise hand option is, if you could raise your hand if you are joining us from Australia. Okay. Noah clapped. Well done, Noah. Oh, I should raise my hand. I don't need to worry about that. Okay, if you could raise your hand if you're joining us from the United States. So put your hand down if you just had it raised. Okay. Raise your hand if you are joining us from Latin America. Kunal, I know you're not joining from Latin America, bro. Put your hand down. All right. Who is joining us from the consuming end of the supply chain? Okay, we have a couple. Noah, this is where you put your hand up too. Well done. That's That's the other option. If people are struggling to find the thing, just put your hand up like that. We can see the videos that are there. Who is joining us from the producing end of the supply chain? Noah, put your hand down. All right. And who are roasters that are in the room? All right. Now, who is joining us from the financial trading side of the room? I know at least one of you is. No, I'll put your hand down. All righty, great. All right, so here we go. So the question is, what needs to change in the coffee supply chain in 2021 and beyond? We want to throw to the room and ask who would like to start the discussion off. Judy, I'm going to go to you.
Okay, welcome everybody else who's joining, and I think this is great ideally. For those that don't know me, I've been around the block for almost 4 decades, half of that on Wall Street, and the past 20 years with my own consulting firm, where I publish fundamental-based research reports and do risk management courses and advisory services for coffee, and then also other soft commodities. So, of course, Lee, you know me, I'm going to kick this off with a very sensitive topic, and that is integrity in contracts. Because in the news lately, this has been a sore point, and it's normal in a bull market where you have producers that sold at lower prices that obviously wish that they didn't sell forward at those lower prices and wish they could take advantage of today's price. But wishing to take advantage of today's price and defaulting on contracts where you hurt others and you cause problems through the supply chain is just not acceptable. And there's tools, risk management, and other ways to handle it than to hurt other producers in your own country and exporters and create all sorts of ill will through the supply chain and problems. And so there has to be a better understanding of the value of contracts.
Okay, that's a really big one, and I'm so glad we got straight there right away. We didn't talk about coffee competitions. We didn't talk about any other kind of fuckery.
No. We get right to the heart of it.
And I knew that if you were the person who spoke first, Judy, that was where it's going to go. If anyone hasn't heard Judy's episode on our podcast, it is, if you don't listen to any other conversation, that's the one to listen to. Judy is really on the boots on the ground in Brazil right now. So how this is going to go from here is Judy's just presented us with the first response to the question. Now we're going to open the room up. If anyone has any questions, now we're going to just chew on this for a little bit as a group of people. So you can unmute your mics now and jump in if anyone would like to say anything to what Judith has just said. I know we've got producers in the room. I'd love to hear what producers, Sylvia, go ahead. I'd love to hear what producers have to say in response to what Judy said. Noah, you've got your hand up. If you, I don't know if that's deliberate with you or not. So Sylvia, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Sylvia. I used to work for Roaster as a coffee buyer, and now I'm an analyst in like a data climate company, but my heart is precisely at coffee, so I'm always around it. And so thank you for putting this together. Well, I think I just wanted to maybe stir the pot a little bit and and
We like that here.
I know, right? And sort of start a conversation. I mean, balance of what Judy said about defaulting on contracts, and also like, I feel like being around coffee, the specialty coffee industry, you always talk about the fair prices for the farmers, and we're hoping that farmers will finally get fairly paid. And now it's this moment when the prices are pretty high up. And what do we think, like, what is now sort of like, how do we find what's ethical when some people default on their contracts because they're having a very hard time feeding their own families, when the fertilizers are high, where inflation is high, and the prices that they contracted for were very low, and now there is an opportunity to get better prices. So so how do we like define what's right and what's wrong in this world, and how do we navigate that? I'll just throw it there and see what happens.
I guess something that I'd like to tack on to that is, for the producers in the room, how does it feel for you when somebody defaults on a contract?
Lee, can I jump in?
Please, Carlos.
Hi, everyone. Lee, thank you for organizing everything. I'm Carlos with CoffeeNet. I have a bit of mixed feelings about this topic because, as some people would know, we're producers, exporters, and importers. And again, so in my shoes, sometimes it's difficult because we supported, as importers and exporters, we supported many farmers through difficult times where we pay them really well. And now, obviously, it's a different topic where they've been being paid extremely well, and sometimes they don't want to fulfill contracts. So one of them is my dad. My dad, at the moment, he wanted to jump off the window at my house because he's always selling ahead, and half of his production he sold last year at a really low rate because he wanted to secure at least making a profit. And then the other half, he sold it really well this year. But it's never going to be fair. But what I can say that will make life a little bit more fair for everyone is that, for example, in our position, when we're signing contracts that are more than 6 months or even a year, we're putting some clauses that when the markets move to a certain point, then that opens a new negotiation. Because I believe when you go that far and you have extreme conditions like the ones happening now, where there's, for different reasons, the prices are extremely going up or down, this will always hurt someone, either the seller, the buyer. And I believe that the financial world has put all these tools, but a lot of farmers don't really understand how it can hurt them in the future. And I believe things like this put into a contract can open a better trade and will really help instead of hurting, by putting these additional clauses. When prices move more than 20% up from where they are, there should be a renegotiation clause so that the buyer and the seller can understand themselves more and be closer to what the market is really offering at the time.
And who instigates that, Carlos? Who instigates that renegotiation, do you think?
Well, for us, it's not instigation. For us, when we do these long contracts, we put it in place and we say, look, guys, this is the way we want to work. We don't want to hurt anyone. For me, doing business as a producer, as an exporter, as an importer, for me, everyone that does business with us, we all have to win. And if we don't all win, then what is the purpose of doing it? It's not going to repeat. And I think the most important thing in doing business, of what I learned from my dad and the time in coffee, is that if we all don't win together, then it's not going to repeat itself. And that's the most important thing, relationships and long-term deals that we do with people and work. So I believe these type of clauses, we try to put them together when people want long-term contracts, because they will allow us to at least break even when the time goes really bad against the market, either for the producer or the roaster. And that will guarantee that no one is losing. Perhaps they're not winning, but at least they're not losing, because today, we sold contracts very low from our farm. And, we're going and speaking to my dad every night thinking, what do we do? And obviously for him, the reputation and his honor is a lot more important than just defaulting, but that is him. And I understand why many other people do it. But I think it's just trying to add fairness into those contracts, because I don't think many people understand what they're doing until it goes against them.
Right. Any other thoughts from any of the producers on that are in the room? Go ahead, Emilio.
A little bit on the same boat. We're producers, millers, exporters, also do a little bit of importing and have relationships throughout the world. And just it's a difficult time, I think, for everyone. We're in a very unique situation where for the last 3 or 4 years, roasters have been paying fairly good differentials for direct relationship coffees. The time has come in a way for them to say, now that the market is high, we're expecting those differentials to come lower. But in a way, also costs for us have gone up, and there's really no way we can reduce those differentials. Not because, again, for a long time, roasters have been there for us, but in a way, at the same time, the higher the coffee or the price goes, percentual wise, the cost also has increased. So we're so used to talking price per pound, but at this rate of increasing in price, we need to start talking about the percentage of cost increase as well per pound. We're so used to talking dollars per pound, but percentage wise, our profit or margins have gone higher or slimmer. So it is just a great deal of mathematics that we need to be dealing with in order to translate that to the production, because it's not only the cost locally that has increased, but also logistics, as we know, fertilizers. There's just no way we can assume those costs, because somehow it needs to be translated all the way to the consumer, and that is, I think, the hardest point right now, because roasters apparently don't have that leverage to pass all those costs directly to the consumer. I think that is where we ought to be, working together with or together to somehow translate that increase in price all the way to the consumer. Together, somehow. Again, as farmers, yes, we might be getting paid higher this year, but it's just a matter of a supply chain all throughout. Somehow we need to translate that, so it's just and relating to the default, it's just, you just need to make sure you're handshaking or you're dealing, with people that, have been in this industry for a long time, that understand the game and understand and make sure that they have plan A, B, and C. You need to be prepared for the defaults. And as well, you need to be prepared as a producer to commit or not. So it's a time to really choose your relationships and to be very careful to what you're committing against. For us, that we're millers and exporters, visiting the farm and understanding all the details on how much of that harvest is committed and how much you can trust this producers. At the same time, importers and roasters, making sure that you're able to fulfill those contracts. And this is when trust is the key. We've all been in this industry for a while, or somehow, this is when you need to trust your supplier or you need to trust your roaster. This is when, it all comes down to this moment. And whoever is defaulting, this is a very small industry. We all know each other. We all, this is a very small circle. So, hey, you better be smart on both ends or all throughout the supply chain, because it's just simple business. This is a handshake. This is a relationship. We've been talking about direct relationships and direct trade. This is where it counts. This is the moment to be there for your supplier and to be there for your customer.
Go ahead, Judith. Thank you, Emilio. That's awesome.
Yeah. So all the comments have been great so far. And, certainly since I posed the question, really appreciate all the different views. Carlos, what I want to say is, one, I commend the approach in terms of building into the contract that there's some escalation clauses and it's open for discussion. I mean, I think that's great. And I think that there's certainly use of futures and options to help to protect on that. What my question for you is, given this year, there's increased costs through the supply chain and high shipping costs, uncertain logistics, are you seeing the pushback from further up the supply chain for the buyers on the other side of the contract? How do they feel about the escalation clauses, or do you have the same clauses that they understand going into it, that they're going to be facing the increased costs? How do you work both sides?
Judy, really interesting. So obviously, as importers, yes, it's very difficult at the moment. We're having this conversation with every single roaster, and they are just going through a rough time. And it's not only because prices are going up, but as you know, for example, here in Australia and in many other places where we have offices, people have been through lockdowns. They're selling less. Their margins, there's no margins. Actually, some of them are losing money. So I with many people, I call it the apocalypse of coffee, because the raw product is going up for them. They are selling much less. They're losing their employees. They're losing money. I just think this was a big snowball that came all together, and really it's threatening the coffee industry itself. But yeah, it's challenging times. To comment something on what Emilio said, I think it's really important, and probably the key to all of this is that we as growers and exporters are having the conversation with roasters, and that's not going anywhere else. I think we as an industry need to reach the consumers, because they are the ones also giving the kickback to the coffee shops, to the roasters. So even as farmers, as exporters, not only the roasters and the people just selling the final product, we all need to put this news out, and we need to explain to people why coffee is going up, because it's not great that they're doing a pushback. I give the example to many of my clients. When you drive up to the petrol station here in Sydney, it's crazy. Sometimes it's 120, then the next day is 180. But do you rock up and you go, it's too high, I'm not going to put petrol today? You don't. Coffee should be like that. If you really appreciate coffee, you will have to pay more, and you need an explanation of why. And that is the thing that I don't think we're communicating properly as an industry. We need to be able to reach them. And as Emilio said, the cost of producing are through the roof as well. And this is something not many people are talking about. Yes, the selling prices are very high, and it's great for producers like us, but the increase in cost of production is dramatic. All the logistic cost, all the increase in any fertilizers we're using out of China is really reducing our margins as well. So people think, when is it going to come down? How much is it going to come down? It probably will, but if it goes down a lot, probably 50%, will probably be breaking even now, because the cost of production definitely went up probably by 30 or 40%, even 50%. So this is something that not many people is talking about.
So I'd like to throw a question tacked onto that. Whose responsibility is it in the industry to take care of that? Because I don't see anybody taking the lead on that. So who takes the lead?
Who takes care of who? The producer?
Well, who takes care of signaling to the consumers that the price of coffee is going up? Who teaches our industry? We have anyone who listens to my podcast knows is sick to fucking death of hearing me say this. But coffee has a branding problem. We call instant coffee. We call espresso coffee. We call roasted coffee. We call $100 a cup, manual brewed coffee. We call that coffee as well. The consumer's confused. And so the brands who are able to communicate things the absolute loudest, which is the Nestle's in the room, they're the ones who are signaling to the consumer market what coffee is defined as. And they are selling coffee the cheapest of everybody. So who takes control of signaling to the consumer market, hey, hold on, you should be pricing, coffee should be priced the same way fruit and veg is priced. That when it changes as an agricultural product, when the cost changes based on the varietal, based on where it's come from and the import costs, et cetera, who takes responsibility for that messaging? Any ideas?
I also want to ask too, and how does that messaging happen?
Right.
What outlets are used? And this kind of is tacked on to a bigger conversation in specifically the specialty coffee industry. Is we talk to each other a lot, and we're not very good at communicating to folks outside of our circles. And so not only who leads that messaging and who leads that effort to explain that to consumers, but how do you do that too?
Go ahead, Emilio.
Well, I think, if we think of what's been happening in the last years, we've been somehow in the specialty industry, been a little bit of successful in a way that we now taught some consumers, okay, there are different processes. There's the wash, the fully washed, the fermented, and anaerobic. We've been so successful at those things. So, well, in a way, we kind of confused everyone else as well. But those things already happened. So I think it's a broader conversation now that we need to, somehow use the marketing that we've been trying to make coffee a little more sexy or a little more compared to other industries. And somehow just focus on adding value, monetary value to just regular coffee as well. We've been focused only on the super high end or the top part of the pyramid. We forgot about every other, just the coffee.
The everyday drinking coffee.
Yeah, so somehow we just need to put it out there, and marketing has helped us in those ways, and has increased the value of those specialty coffees. So I think we can do it together, and we've never in a way have a better and more open conversation between producers, middlemen, and the roasters and cafes. So I think this is a matter of who, it is all of us.
And how do we get that started though? Does the SCA take responsibility for, I said it, does the SCA, who is a trade organization, are they responsible for saying, okay, so we're going to put together a campaign, or does ASCA do it? Jonathan? Do we put together some sort of a campaign that we all share, and we go out there and we all, blast this video out together that says to the consumer, so every day the price of your cup of coffee is going to change. You should look for a new market price. I mean, how do we do it? Diego, go ahead. Or Noah. It changed very quickly. I don't know. Noah, go ahead.
Me, I was gonna agree. We need to take the stakeholder approach to the whole thing, and it has to be everybody come together, and there should be a lobby party as well. Like, in any other industry, there's always somebody lobbying somebody somewhere. It is an expensive exercise, but I guess it's been proven by a lot of other industries as well. The other thing I was going to add, what's happening today in specialty coffee, it's never happened before. Instant coffee, pods, drip bag, steep bag. I guess there's a lot of new technologies that it's bringing coffee and specialty coffee closer to home and consumer at home, rather than keeping it sophisticated. I think in the past, we didn't have pods, right? Now you can actually taste a specialty coffee pod versus a commercial pod. And you can taste the difference. Like, it's gigantic. It's not even close. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if we continue investing in things that make things a lot simpler for people at home to adapt to, and let them taste the variation and the difference, it will slowly get the people into where we need them to be from an educational point of view as well, because now they can taste it. They're not just, reading about it, So I guess that is a very important point as well, is what are the technologies that we need to use? How do we simplify it rather than how do we make it more and more complicated? So, and this is where we don't need those really high end, like Emilio say, we always use the top liners. You can really use a Papayán and make it taste really good as a pod versus any Nespresso out there, So I guess the reason why I'm saying, because, there is technologies out there. If specialty coffee come together really strongly, we can, for example, invest in home compostable pods. It exists, it's there, but you need massive amount of you need to buy a lot for you to have access to these things. So there is technology that could fix the issue of environment if we really want to, but if we move into things that are easy to brew and become more home consumers, I guess we will end up having better margins. And then, you know, throughout the history of specialty coffee, the specialty coffee was more at the cafe, was very hard to do at home, you know, but I think COVID really changed that. So we need to take that really massive step forward right now and invest in those type of technologies. I guess that's all I have to say for now. But I'll go back to what you guys continue talking.
Thank you, Noah. Diego, go ahead.
Hey guys, I'm Diego Barahona from El Salvador. I'm a coffee producer. I want to speak at Nails Farm. I'm going to answer with a question. I was wondering, like, okay, we talk about like, keeping coffee prices up and increasing them, but at what point is it sustainable to keep doing this? Can the consumer support these increases all the time? Shouldn't we look at ways to decrease production costs? So I was wondering if you guys have any answers on those questions.
Mm.
Can you repeat that, Lee? Like, what is the question exactly?
Yeah, so is it sustainable to keep increasing coffee prices? Can the consumer support this increase all the time? Shouldn't we look at the other way to decrease production costs but maintain quality and all that?
Oh,
Okay,
I have so much to
I
say
can-
about that. Go ahead.
Okay, I can give you a good example, right?
Yeah.
So we were thinking about an example that I'm doing, and I've been looking into it, and I'm happy to share with you guys because you're all open-minded. So we've got these, you know, somebody in Scotland did manifesto, right? You were talking about reducing cost of production, but the issues when you start talking about these things, these are mass production, you know. So what's he gonna end up with? Small scale is very hard to use the word efficiency. It's not easy, you know. Actually, coffee, the reason why we don't know the price of it, I tell you what, because most of us, we don't really invest heavily in branding. We don't invest heavily in buying big boxes, big bags, a lot of things. It's actually way more expensive than what it is from a branding perspective. So to go back to reduce cost is really not easy. It's very complicated system, and like, you know, if you want to do a beer can, if you want to do a canning, let's say you want to do a canning, you can't just buy a canning because the labels needs to be 5,000 for it to make financial sense, so you can reduce the cost of the goods. It doesn't work, you know. So there is a fine line, you know, like, do you want specialty fresh or you want nitrogen flush with 6 months shelf life, you know? I think that perception need to shift radically, and we need to go back to where the other guys are doing, you know. We need to go back to the, you know, the people that we judged them at the beginning, and now we're like facing the similar issues. They're like, all right, well, shit, actually nitrogen flush does work, but if I want to do it, I need to order 5,000 labels of this specific single origin, but I only have 500 boxes of it. So how do I end up doing it? So to answer your question, I'm going to answer properly. It's very difficult to go back anymore. You know, I think we only have to find ways, as Emilio said, and other people saying, we need to move forward with values, you know, and that's the only way moving forward. Going back, it's going to hurt. That's all I'm going to say. I don't know if I answer the question.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know what?
No worries.
So quickly, we actually have a contribution on YouTube, a comment, and kind of going back to this question of what is the messaging and how do we do it. Brian Gaffney says, from the single consumer's point of view, I expect this news to come from the roasters that I patronize. I look for them to be good business partners with the producers with whom they work over time. I will also say, Brian, I've heard you on a podcast before, and you are not the everyday normal consumer. I know that you are the type of consumer who digs a little bit deeper and is like very, very interested and very passionate about coffee, even as, you know, just a consumer. It's, you know, a lot about the coffee industry compared to many other people. And so I do I mean, I guess if anybody wants to respond to that, you know, he expects this news to come from the roasters and looks to them for to be good partners, business partners with the producers with whom they work over time.
Xavier, go ahead. You haven't had a chance to say anything at this point. Go ahead.
Now that we're talking about consumers, I am strictly a consumer.
Welcome, sir.
Lived in California most of my life, now on the East Coast of the United States, and I'm now visiting here in Hawaii. When I traveled to Hawaii, I'm sitting on the plane, and I was amazed at the conversations I was hearing on the plane about people saying, oh, you've got to try the Kona coffee. It's really amazing. And you got to get the Kona coffee here because it's 100% Kona coffee. Don't trust what you get back in the States, because you've got to look at the packaging and it says Kona coffee, but when you read it, you find out it's only 10% Kona coffee and you have no idea what the rest of the coffee is. And I was quite bluntly astounded to hear these conversations on the plane of other just regular people being pretty sharp of what's going on. So I don't know if you can do like a thing on the plane, a short video to educate people. I think that's one way you can do it, as people that are coming into coffee producing countries to explain a little bit about what's going on in those countries or what's going on in the coffee industry. I know for myself also back in Baltimore, we buy our coffee from specific coffee roasters. We want to go, you know, again, I may not have all the lingo down right, but from one grower, you know, organic. And then we liked a couple of places because you could buy this container and you just take the container back and they would fill it up with the coffee that you wanted. And for us, we're going like, oh man, we're getting that because we don't have to deal with a plastic bag or all this other stuff. We've got a container now, we take it back, they put a little label on there of what we bought. And I just thought those are smart ideas that as other consumers catch on and they go like, yeah, do that. But I think the news also is getting out there about coffee, because I've had other friends of mine on the East Coast say, so tell me more about Kona coffee. How good is it? You know, is it really worth it? How do you really brew a good cup of coffee? Does it make a difference? And I said like, oh my God, yes, it does. What you regularly are drinking is not good. You need to know how to really brew a cup of coffee. So, I mean, I think the education's out there, but you just got to get it out more. And I don't know how you do it. Maybe, like I said, maybe you produce a small little clip that you play on film on the planes of people coming into these coffee producing countries. But like I said, it was nice to hear this conversation, overhearing conversations on the plane.
We don't hear that kind of conversation happening enough in the general public. Judy, go ahead.
So mine is in response to, my comment here is in response to how do you lower the cost of production to increase the margins for producers? And it's efficiency on the farm, and a lot of it is being done already. And as an analyst, I look at the numbers constantly. I live and breathe these numbers. And there's something that I always point out to people, and that is on even the smallest farm, you have increased the productivity by replacing older varieties with newer, more disease-resistant varieties that give you higher yields. And instead of looking at the price per pound, when you're considering the price, you should really consider the income on your farm, or at the very least, the volume per hectare, because you are making more money based on higher yields. And so even though the futures price might be the same, if your income is higher because of increased productivity, then you need to account for that difference also. And it's not done. People are always looking at, oh, the price is at 10-year lows, and it's always on cents per pound. But you sell coffee by the bag, and you know at the end of the day what your income is, and it's based on the yields per hectare. And we're not really translating that when we're comparing prices. So that's the first thing. And then the other point to that is in Brazil, there's increased density, so that they have doubled, in some areas more like tripled, the number of trees per hectare. And so that increases your income. The other point is that in any store, if you look at any coffee shop, Starbucks, wherever, they are maximizing their income per square foot or per square meter. They are selling bagels or donuts or sandwiches and water and all sorts of beverages, and used to sell CDs and cups, t-shirts, mugs, hats. They're maximizing their revenue, and it's not just from coffee. And in Vietnam, how producers are putting more cash in their pocket is they're intercropping with pepper or other cash crops to help increase the revenue. And that has to be done more as well. So when there's low prices for coffee, which inevitably there will be, and you can't change the economic cycle, but you could help yourself in protecting yourself against that. And part of that is figuring out how to intercrop and diversify to stabilize your revenue.
Mm. And the other thing that I want to add to that is, as someone who does a lot of business coaching in the coffee industry, the one thing that I can see is a big challenge is that people don't quite understand the numbers and their financial health and how to get access to that. And so what we spend a lot of time doing is helping people understand how to read a profit and loss statement and how to do a cost breakdown analysis. And so, Diego, when you say things like what your beautiful question was, is, how do we reduce the cost of inputs? The issue that we're finding is this has been the historic way that particularly the consuming end of the market, the businesses at the consuming end, this is the way that they usually tackle the issue of my expenses are going up and I don't want to increase the price of coffee because my consumers might run away. And I notice my competitors are reducing their costs. And so rather than going to increasing revenue by increasing my prices, we're going to go into the cost of goods section of our profit and loss statement, and we're going to cut from there. And if we can cut from there, what that's going to mean is that our profitability will go up, because we have to figure out how to do this somehow. And as long as we remain profitable, which they haven't even recognized is at around 3% net profit. As an industry, we shouldn't be running on 3% net profit for any of our businesses. And when I do training and coaching with some producers, one thing that you tragically find out is that they are in the same position. They don't understand how to read their numbers. They don't understand what profit and loss statements are either. They're so busy getting about the business of farming and getting the coffee produced that they look at me and laugh and say, what do you think that we've got time to spend on spreadsheets? Why would we be doing this? We have to be out there doing coffee. We've got accountants to do that kind of thing if we're lucky. And by not being financially aware and understand the financial statements, what you end up is waiting for tax time till someone tells you how much money you've made. And then you've lost a whole year of the decision makings that could influence your profitability. Judy, did you want to say something there? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, your hand is up.
My hand down. Sorry. Well, I could always say something. I could always add to that. And
go ahead.
and one is, if you compare Brazil, and everyone thinks of Brazil and mechanized harvesting. By the way, I'm going back to Brazil on Thursday, my 4th trip.
I
in
can't
10
wait
months.
till you
Yeah,
come back on the
so-
podcast and talk to us about that.
Yeah. So what, from my traipsing around Brazil throughout the pandemic, I've been to some of the largest farms and some of the smallest. And so I've seen how some of the differences are. And not every large farm is mechanized. There are some that still believe in traditional hand picking of coffee as the best method. And they find that it actually increases their quality and that they lose too much in mechanized harvesting. So there's the opposite side. Some of the smaller Brazilian growers, what they do is to manage costs, is they produce 100% one year, and then they skeletonize their trees, and they go to 0% production the next year, and then they go back to 100% the year after. So this way they don't have to spend on the labor and the harvesting, and the input costs change. And so that's how they manage their costs. And then they look at their profitability over a 2-year cycle, not a 1 year. So that would be farms, a small farm in Brazil is obviously larger than some small farms elsewhere. So, that would be like a 9-10 hectare farm, where a lot of them are doing that. And they find that helps. And it also helps to keep yields high during the on year, because the trees had that period of rest, as opposed to continually having to suffer with lower yields and high costs.
Go ahead, Madeleine.
Yeah, I kind of linked to this whole general topic right now is a comment from Courtney Snowden on the YouTube chat, and they wrote on reducing production costs. Coffee is an agricultural product, and generally speaking, in quotes, technology advances should help reduce production costs at a farm level. This might be the case for huge scale farms in Brazil, but not so much for Central America or Africa smallholder farms, where handpicking is still massively prevalent. And Judy, you bring that up too with mechanical harvesting, and there is a give and take there with the quality may decrease because of that. There are other technology advances that can be made, and that can go through the milling process and sorting, whether it's on the cherry end or the green end. And from my own personal experience, usually the question ends up being, well, what do we do with the stuff that doesn't make it as specialty then? Now that I have this extra thing that's going to sort it out to make it even cleaner, now I have more other stuff. And now, where do I sell that? And how do I move that and stuff? And so just wanting to add Courtney's comments there as well in my own little addition to it.
I feel us edging towards an infused coffees discussion here, but let's hold off on that. But
My
Sylvia
artwork
had,
behind me is coffee.
sorry?
The coffee bean behind me, that's actually from coffee husks. So someone made money by creating art.
So by repurposing or finding other
Yeah.
ways to reinvent the coffee. Sylvia, we overlooked, I didn't deliberately overlook you. I was looking for a moment to bring you in. And I hope you haven't lost your mojo to contribute your comment, but I want to give you an in there if you have something to say. Or are you good? Just give me a thumbs up if you're good.
Sure, I'll just chime in for a second, but I feel like Carlos will have a perfect segue from what Madeleine was saying. But I just wanted to go back to 5 questions that go back to like, how do we even get to how do we get to educating our consumers about higher prices? I actually wanted to ask a little bit Judy, and maybe if there are other analysts that look at the whole sector of like, do we have to get to that point where the large roasters and large companies like Folgers and Dunkin', they have to get to that wall where they're seeing really like inflationary costs that are impacted their fiscal years, and then they will jack up the prices. Therefore, the whole industry will sort of start following that. It's kind of like, Starbucks was more so first, and the instant coffee rather than specialty. And maybe that's also where the higher prices will first come from. And then it will get to us because the general population will be educated from that angle.
Oh, but inflation's transitory, isn't it, Sylvia? That's the Fed. I'm sorry, I'm being an asshole. Go ahead, Judy.
That's good.
I'm well known as being an asshole, don't worry. Everyone here will tell you.
But we love you. So,
Thank you. The feeling is mutual.
so as far as costs, remember that there's the old shrink in the package routine. And
the shrinkage, yeah.
okay. So what happens is, to not raise the cost to the consumer, you shrink the package. And so the 16-ounce can, the 1 pound can, is 10 ounces. And it's not just in the coffee industry. You look at the citrus industry. Okay, it's all the same. Okay, so a lot of times, to keep the price, you change the packaging, and you think that the consumers maybe don't notice, but of course they do. And then another way is by being innovative and completely retooling the packaging. So you put a different lid on that's airtight and vacuum fresh, and whatever way you can. And there is, what people forget about is, there's a huge cost to that on the part of roasters for research and development. It's not that it's just to change the price. There's maybe the price went up a little bit, changed the packaging, but they invested heavily in that. And it's also costly to change labels and the retooling manufacturing. So there's always something that is done. A lot of times you could increase the price by not increasing the price of coffee, but you mask it by increasing the price of the pastry in your retail shop, because you don't want to compete on the price of coffee and keep that the same, because that's what maybe consumers are coming in for. And it's less transparent when you change the price of something else. So, there's changing prices without really messaging the consumer.
And something to add to that I hear a lot is, especially when producers come on the podcast, they're quite surprised that, given that usually a cup of coffee costs more than a pound of coffee on face value, they are quite surprised when they hear that profit margins are very slim, or they hear that it's difficult to raise prices by 10 cents a cup. And when we have those discussions, producers are quite surprised that the consuming end, businesses at the consuming end, are struggling with understanding how to get more profitable and where to get that little tiny bit of leverage is. And so when we say, we've got to change labels, or we've got to buy new bottles or whatever, the acceptance is, yeah, but you're making so much money. And there's a beautiful obviousness to the disconnect, that the businesses at the consuming end and the businesses at the producing end are mirroring their same challenges. That inputs are going up, labor's very expensive, labor shortages are prevalent everywhere. Everything's challenging at both ends, and yet both are saying, well, why don't you fix it, and why don't you fix it? Go ahead, Carlos. Oh, he's talking to somebody. Go ahead. Okay, Gina.
Hey. Hi, everyone. I'm Gina, and I'm from Sydney, and I'm a roaster. Very, very interesting conversation. Really, we need these conversations, I think, every week, especially if we're trying to look at how we can, readjust or help the what am I trying to say? Look, there's like Sylvia, I want to go back to probably about 4 questions ago.
Go ahead.
Look, the thing is, how far and how much can we keep absorbing these increases in prices? And, you know, I've actually got an agriculture background. It wasn't growing coffee, it was actually growing tobacco. So I saw a lot of the same things happening in tobacco as it is happening here in coffee. So coming from a farmer's background and going back to Judith, I think, was saying, or sorry, it was Diego. I liked his question. I do believe farmers, as well as everybody along the whole value chain, have the opportunity to find a way of reducing costs. Because, you know, at the moment as a roaster, and I'm not a big roaster, I'm small, but I feel I do have an impact being around so long. And the first thing as a roaster, what do I think about? I think about my customers. I think about my cafes. And it's very difficult I understand what's going on in this industry. I've been around now for like 18 years. I've seen it all. I've heard it all. I'm not an analyst by no means. You know, I don't put myself out there as some guru that knows everything, but I've visited many coffee farmers, small and large, and working very closely with a particular cooperative in Papua New Guinea who has this beautiful man, Elijah Haro, who has put together a collective of very small holder coffee growers to enable these smaller farmers, you know, to obviously get a better price for market. So I'm probably all over the place at the moment with what I'm trying to say, but I'm trying to answer all these questions. I think but I think what I'm trying to say is, you know, we demand so much from the farmer as well. We want these beautiful, perfect, premium tasting coffees, but are we all willing to pay for it? Are we really willing to pay for it? And also, how do we expect the consumer to know everything about a farmer? I mean, the consumer at the end of the day is like a cigarette smoker. They just want their fix, okay?
Really interesting.
Yeah, it's the same thing I'm seeing, and I saw the whole repackaging with tobacco. So luckily, I mean, I sort of planned ahead, and I'm good for packaging for probably a couple of years. I may have to do something a little bit different where I've got to, you know, place an individual label. But what I'm trying to say is, how far do we go with all these increases? And the problem is we're up against inflation. That's what we're up against. We're all up against inflation. So yeah, I do believe from a farmer's point of view, and I'm not a coffee farmer, and I've seen a lot of subsistence farming, because these farmers, that's the only way they're going to cope. You know, when you know, if they're, you know, in their low season, or they're, you know, if they didn't get a good harvest, luckily they've, you know, the smart farmers will actually grow other, you know, like intercropping to keep their families and their communities alive, which is amazing. I mean, I wish I could do that in the city of Sydney. I've got a balcony here, and I'm hard pressed trying to.
Tomatoes, Gina. Tomatoes. That's it. That's all you're allowed to grow on your balconies. Tomatoes and maybe cucumbers. That's it.
And cucumbers are like, what, $18 a kilo here? It's insane. Yeah. Everything is just upside down. It's insane. I don't know how. It's
transitory, Gina. It's fine. Yeah. You're going to get over it in about 3 weeks. It's all going to be gone. The Fed's going to fix everything. Don't worry about it. Just trust them.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is, I'm all for paying the farmer, you know, above premium. I'm all for that. I'm all for everybody being treated fair and equitable. But I don't know. Look, it's going to be a slow process to educate the customer. I'm doing it through, you know, I think it's going to be a very individual thing for roasters. You know, the way I'm marketing and putting out my message, I'm doing it my way. I'm doing the best I can. I think it's going to be definitely a very, very individual thing. But going back to the demand for, all these new processing methods, see, I'm not even sure the costs involved in that. But suddenly these farmers, are hit by all these, the specialty end of the market is fantastic that we got that whole, branding happening. But now it's so skewed. I think Amelia was saying it's so skewed. Everybody says they're selling specialty coffee, which some are not. And so how do we keep this transparency? For me, the only thing I can control is what I do. And I will continue to be as transparent as possible. And I will continue to work very closely with my smallholder coffee farmers in Papua New Guinea. But mind you, that's not the only coffee I buy, obviously. But I think we've got to go back to relationship, keep that relationship alive, not just with farmers or suppliers, but also with your customers. For me, as soon as the lockdowns were announced here in New South Wales, I immediately went into customer focused, stay customer focused. Where can I help my customer? Where can I help my customer understand what's happening? Where can I help my customer stay alive? And I didn't lose one customer. Yes, a few suffered. A few have suffered, but I think we've just got to come back to being, just keep ourselves informed and really understand the whole value chain and what happens. And that's up to us. That's up to us, not our consumer. That's up to us.
Gina, just to add one thing on your comment, I really believe everyone is probably in a way taking your approach, and we're all going to do our own thing. But I really believe that if we don't really pass on these costs immediately, as importers,
without a doubt, Carlos. Yes, without a doubt, we have to
working for free, and we all work really hard to be able to move forward. And like I said initially in my comment, when we do business, we like everyone to do well. And I think a lot of us are just afraid of passing on to the consumers what's going on. So we all as an industry need to start directing more comments directly to the consumers. Guys, demand more value and pay more for your coffee. That is the message that we need to send out. The more roasters, I get phone calls every day now. Carlos, do you think I should increase my prices today? Wait a month, wait the other month. I said, it's a reality already. We're paying really high prices for coffees. And the more time you take to increase your prices, the more time you're going to be working for free or pushing the boundaries of your suppliers and the farmers, because you're just causing these frictions in between all of us.
Carlos, sorry, Carlos. Sorry if you confused, if I was sounding confusing. By no means I'm saying we, don't pass on the cost to the cafe owner. I have to, because definitely I'm now paying. The prices have gone up more than I expected. So yes, we're going to have to pass on the cost to the cafe owner, definitely. And the cafe owner is going to, without a doubt, it's inevitable.
Go look for another supplier. I mean, that's the reality of what happens, right, in our industry. And we need to acknowledge that. We have this whole race to the bottom bullshit that happens in our industry, where the moment your roaster turns around and says, hey, look, I have to put, and I know a number of you in here have shared this with me, that you are going through the process of putting your prices up with your customers. And so what happens is they turn around and they say, okay, let me just go see if somebody else can do it at the same price.
They might be able to do it for a while, Lee, maybe the bigger companies, but it's not sustainable for any of us in the long term.
But going back to what Amelia was saying, we are in historic times. So I don't need to look at the long term right now. What I need to do is survive the next 6 months. And if the next 6 months means that I'm going to be able to get with a new roaster who can keep me at the prices that I'm at, then why wouldn't I do that? Because right now people feel like they're in survival mode.
Also, Lee, I think another thing that I wanted to mention to everyone, I'm not sure Emilio and Diego, if you're going through this, but a lot of people that we work with in long-term relationships, which we had already, are obviously, we've always sold great coffees, and for that there's a premium, right? And people have been very supportive, roasters that work with us. But now the prices are through the roof, and obviously for them it's a problem, right? Because their bottom line is hit, and they're slowly moving the prices up. They're asking many times, Carlos, can you speak to them and notice or tell them that we've been supporting them for such a long time? Can they keep prices a little bit lower than what they are? Because we've been there for them. What's going to happen now? Can they be there for us right now? And it's been interesting to have these conversations with a lot of people. For example, as producers, we have a few single estate coffees, and we've been actually helping out important relationships that we have, because I know they're under strains, and for us it's still a big profit or a good profit for us as farmers. But when we source from other people and we sell to everyone else as roasters, it's difficult because what I try to explain to them is that coffee in Colombia, in producing countries, is like cash. They can literally go with their coffees in a bag in their car, walk to the nearest exporting or milling place, and they will give you the price of the day minimum. And that price of the day has gone up so much in terms of what it used to be 6 months or a year ago. That is what it is. So there is a price for coffee every day, and that's for the most basic coffee. We don't even work with that. And some people want to pay below that because they have been supporting farmers for a long time. But what I tell them is, look, this is the time where they want to make a little bit of extra cash, a little bit of extra money, because they need those cycles. Every 8 or 10 years it happens. And it's really hard to explain to them. I don't know if you guys have had the same issue of dealing with these type of questions, because in a way I understand them, and as farmers we've helped them. But when we source from other places, that probably means we're out of pocket or losing money, and we cannot do that, obviously.
I think in our case, sorry, I have my hand up.
Yeah.
So I think in our case, well, first of all, similar to your operation, we're not only producers, but we also purchase coffee from other farmers. And that is, I wish I could just tell my customers, yes, no worries, I'll keep, I'll sell you at the market price because you've been paying 50, 70, 80 cents per pound extra for the last 2 years. But the thing is that, when you go out in the market right now locally, you just cannot find coffees at anything below the market. You just don't have access to them because there's a lot of the bigger mills. They're just snagging those coffees as soon as they can because they know there will be a shortage. And most producers are already sold or are already, we don't want to be facing any defaults as well. So we're very, very careful with the kind of coffee that we're going to go buy. And we need to assure that the margins are there. Again, right now, yes, coffee has been sold at differentials, always, but the higher the price it is, if you keep that same differential, the margin is just slimmer and slimmer and slimmer. And we just can't take the risk on a tiny little 3-4% margin, net margin. And it's not worth the business. We have a lot of roasters saying, what if I buy 10 boxes instead of 4? Well, you're just gonna make me lose more money. So we just rather be right now careful and not commit to bigger mistakes. And the other thing is that when I say it's just a very complex problem, it's everything just got mixed together, so like the cost not only of labor has gone up, but in general we already know that the input of your fertilizers for the next year, just potassium alone, has increased 40%. So
wow.
Yes. So like that's something that we need already to be planning for that. In our case, we're about to begin harvest in 1 month. So we already know that all of our costs, logistics is not only increased on the export of coffee or on the vessel or on the inland in destination, it has also increased for us locally. Gasoline has gone up, and just intakes in general has gone up. I would say 40-50%. If we were already in El Salvador producing at a cost of $150 to $170 per pound, now the cost of production locally is $230 per pound. We just can't do anything other than translate that to our customers. There's no way we're going to lose money. So I'd rather not make the sale.
Go ahead, Diego.
Yeah, Emilio is really right. So for us, like costs go up. So, and I work with banks. That means if things go up, I have to go to the bank and say, hey, I need more money. For me, that's a big risk. Let's say the consumer is like, I'm not going to pay for that coffee anymore because it's too expensive. And I have all this debt. So how do I pay back the bank? You know, it's like that simple.
Yeah.
It's really complicated. It's a big financial burden for our producers.
And speaking of banks, sorry to interrupt, you know,
No, go ahead.
when they finance us, when the banks finance us, they finance us by dollars per pound. So at least in this country, they finance $1 per pound, and that includes the maintenance of the farm and then the harvesting. That's it, nothing else. So everything.
No other inputs.
Oh no, nothing else. So if you just want to go out there and start buying coffee, or if you want to go out there and start selling coffee at a loss, you're just done. You won't get access to more capital because you're set with $1 per pound. That's what you get from financing institutions.
Wow. Go ahead, Carlos.
Lee, another topic that I think it's been out there, but no one is really defining it. And I think it's super important, not only for the producer, the exporter, the importer, but also I don't even know what it means for the consumer, is transparency. This has been a topic that everyone is talking about, everyone is using for their purchasing models. And it's probably a very interesting place to talk about it and try to define it, because I've seen so many different things about transparency. And I was speaking to a lot of people lately, and I don't really see the benefits to the consumers yet. I found it a very interesting topic that I think is very confronting. I see a lot of positives, but I also seen it used by many companies in a negative way. Let me explain myself. So first of all, it'd be great to look at the definition of transparency and what that means. For a lot of roasters that I've been speaking to lately, from us, they just want to know FOB prices, farm gate prices, the cost of milling, the cost of transporting, every single aspect of our cost and our operations. And initially the comments was about them being able to ensure that we are paying really well farmers. I think everyone knows us because of the coffees that we work with. And I can guarantee many people that if you don't pay well people, they're not going to work for you with 5-7 years, like most of the farmers do with us. So the initial conversation is about that, but then it gets to the point where they have all our costs and they can put that in a spreadsheet and say, Carlos, so you and your export company, it's you're doing 10% out of this deal. And the comment initially was being able to assure that they were paying well farmers. And then it comes down to how much are you making and if that is fair for them or not, to the point that it's become an issue sometimes. So transparency, I think it's a great debate, a very interesting topic that I think has a lot of positives, but I've also seen the negatives, and I wanted to see here as roasters, as producers, as exporters, and see what they think. Because say, for example, from a producer point of view, I've sat down many times and asked myself, okay, how is this going to help the producers? And as far as I know, a lot of people that are working with us and are putting this into their packaging, FOB, farm gate prices, as a consumer, should I just go and read and buy the one that is paying more the producer? What about the quality? What about the innovation? Did we bought a good coffee or not a good coffee? I think, in my opinion, we're losing the FOB price, and the farm gate is probably 10% of the topic of innovation, of transparency, and everything else is lost. And
how you define those things as well. Like, how do you define farm gate? How do you define farm gate in El Salvador versus in Colombia?
Let's say you can, and obviously this is how savvy the consumers are. So I just think all of this information it's gonna end up confusing the consumers because they don't have the knowledge. Like Lee said, how do they understand this? And again, it's the topic in between farmers, exporters, and roasters. But I think we're not communicating properly to the consumer why and how are we adding value. Why does my mother or grandmother or a normal person, which is 95% of the people that buy coffee, walks into a cafe, looks at a packaging and goes, anaerobic, fermentedly this way, that way, farm gate, price FOB. my mom will go like, oh, I don't understand this. Perhaps I go into this pack that says this farm is owned by 3 beautiful people. By paying an extra $1, we are ensuring that they can go to school, university, and we're really improving their lives. They love coffee and they define themselves as specialty growers. We are losing the point. We're getting into all
Well,
these
that's
things.
what Nestle's saying, right? Nestle's telling everybody how they're funding schools and they're funding universities and hospitals and things like that. That's a digestible message for a consumer.
My
Carbonic
question,
maceration is not.
my question
Yeah.
to everyone is, what is the benefit of transparency for the consumers? And if we wanted
Great
transparency,
question.
shouldn't it be all the way to the consumers? I haven't seen the first roaster yet publishing how much their cost of coffee is and how much do they sell at, and then what is their margin. I believe it's a very important topic, and by some people is really well taken and by other ones is not. And also, how do we define it? I don't know if you guys have any comments about this topic.
Go for it. Anyone in the room who wants to make some comments on that? Go ahead, Tara.
Okay.
Oh, my bad. Sorry. I asked you to unmute and you muted you at the same time. My bad. Go ahead, Tara. Unmute.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now I could be heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Carlos, I think you bring up some really great points in regards to transparency, where so many roasters are all about it. And we want to be as transparent as possible. I think the problem is, and I'm experiencing this now, where like, we put out not transparent reports, but like we'll tell you as much as you want to know, as much as we know, and people just don't want to digest it. They just don't want to listen. And so there's this kind of issue where I think for roasters, it's like, hey, let's get this out here. Here's this information. Take it. And they just don't want to bite. Right. And so it's almost like we're having to sell transparency. We're having to sell you being interested in this information, which is so vital. And I really like what Lee said, where like, yeah, Nestle is kind of saying like, hey, you're buying, you're helping to support schools and hospitals and all these things, because that is digestible, because especially, here in the States and many of these major retail focused, consuming countries, we are so disjointed from what is happening at the producing level because we can't see it. We can't hear it. There's just massive disconnection. And that is not something that we could try to bind. And so what I can tell you is that when you put out pricing like that and you say, hey, we paid, $4.50 for this coffee and we're reselling it for probably 14 to 15 per pound, it's like people would be in shock. And they'd be like, what do you mean? Why are you charging this? And I think a huge issue that kind of comes back to this too, and this is totally diving into a much bigger conversation, is like the market for coffee is wild, where we don't have minimum pricing for things, right? The market for it is so uncontrollable, where like specialty coffee roasters, we're competing. We genuinely are. We are not competing with our next specialty coffee roaster down the street. Who we're competing against is McDonald's, Panera, and Dunkin' Donuts, who right now sell coffee for $1 a cup, right? And that is the average. At least I'm speaking for America, and I won't speak for anybody else because that's where I'm in the States. Like that's what we're competing against.
But sorry, Tara, I got to say something there. We've got another beast that's emerging that I'm not sure if people are aware of regarding what Tara is saying. Pret a Manger has just launched a subscription program for people in New York, whereby you spend $9.99 a month and you can have 5 cups of coffee per day on a $9.99. You walk into any store of Pret a Manger across America, you show them your card, you swipe it, and you can get up to 5 coffees a day on that. That's the next model that we're going to have to be competing up against. Sorry, Tara, I just had to put that in there. Go ahead.
No, I'm glad you did. I think that's super interesting to know about, because that's just kind of where we're at least here again in the States. And so like, I would love the idea of being able to put up our prices of what we paid for and what we're charging you. The issue, not the issue, is that, I think we're saying is like, we can say all we want, but we can't force people to listen. And that's the hardest part there, is we can't get people to listen.
Right.
And the 1% that do.
Is it perhaps that tells you that the message is incorrect? Because we can't force people to listen, but if that means we're probably not speaking their language, isn't it?
to a degree, but I think everyone, not only one does speak different languages, but two, it's having to figure out what they care about, right? Everyone cares. And so kind of talking about what like Gina said, it's like, okay, and Xavier, it's like, all right, we can change our packaging because some people will read. Some people will listen to our baristas and have that experience. Some people are more going to be about social media. Some people are going to care on an emotional state. Some people are going to care on the pricing point and kind of figuring it out. So don't get me wrong, I definitely hear you out. We're like, yeah, we definitely should change our messaging.
Right.
But my gosh, how many different avenues we have to do it is so difficult. And what I can tell you just from like a real life experience is that when I came into the company I'm working for now, I was very adamant about creating bean bios, which are just simple one sheets about the coffee, the producer, how it's grown, all this other stuff, as much as we possibly could. And I'm thinking, great, we can get this exposure out. We send them out for free, no problem. Like just get them out as much as possible. I maybe
And
have
nobody cared.
one client who's interested in it.
Yeah.
And that's like, oh man, that was a bit of a grounding experience. So I hear you out. We need to change what we're saying and how we're saying it. But I think, one, we're dealing with, there's no minimum pricing here in regards to coffee. That's just like, the Wild West of it. And two, it is very taxing and exhausting to constantly figure out different avenues of portraying that message.
And I want to kind of point out two businesses that are here today and I've had a lot to do with seeing how they've grown and addressed this issue. Perspective Roasters, based in Virginia. Shout out to Sekou, who's here with us, and Stitch Coffee from Noir. I think both of them have addressed this question of transparency, which is a really fantastic question, Carlos. What is it? Their transparency is value-based. And so what they're going to do, what they've done is they've been transparent about what their values are and tried to find consumers that are aligned with those values and been openly transparent about that, because the other discussion is just too hard to get people on board with. And so the idea of aligning consumers based on a value system, from what I've witnessed from both of these brands, that's been the leverage that's given them the opportunity to open other discussions. And Sekou and Noah, maybe you can jump in and agree or disagree and maybe share if that's the approach that you've taken.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is definitely the value added activity, right? So when you start sharing all these information, is you just want to differentiate yourself from other people, and that could add value. But I was going to add before about, so there is two things in value added. There is perceived quality and expected quality, right? So perceived quality is what we think it is, expected for quality what they think it is. So sometimes we always have this thoughts that, if we give that much, it's gonna help, but the people perceive expected quality is this much, right? So when we give too much, it becomes no value added activity anymore. So I think this is what happened with transparency report and stuff like that, because we're trying so hard to have an inside out approach to what we are doing rather than outside in. So we're not asking the consumer, we're not doing proper survey and say, look, what do you want on your packaging, That's why you go to the wine industry. You actually don't see anything. Like seriously, there's not even tasting notes sometimes. I looked at the bottle like, why would I pay $35 for this? And I don't know what my expectation are when I open it. It's some bottles don't even have that, right? So I guess it's about how we're gonna use these information effectively, right? Like there is Everlane, which is a great clothing industry. Sorry, not clothing industry, a clothing company. That I really looked at it when I wanted to do the transparency thing as well. Like 7 Seed, been around in the coffee, they did a great job, but they own a farm, right? The information they have is very different to what I will have that I've never been in a farm, right? So Everlane, the way they did it is they just showed comparison, and they actually answer your question, Carlos, because they do show how much it costs them and how much they're selling versus the competitors. So if you guys want to check the way they scale it up, they're actually one of the best companies out there to check how they did it. but yeah, transparency, it's a big question. It's very important, and I think it's important for us as roasters mostly at the moment than it is for consumer. I think we want to be proud to know what's going on, and so maybe later on we will gather enough data to know how to sell it. I think selling it is the key. I think that is probably the language we need to speak, right? Like I remember when we had Map It Forward once, long time ago at Sydney, and they asked the question, service, sale, and something else, right? What I realized in the industry, it's my experience, is that sale is very missing in what I've seen from a cafe point of view, right? Like baristas don't sell things. We just do what we've been given on the order. So it's very hard for us to sell the idea of a batch because we don't have that interaction. We never did. We're always, hitting behind coffee machines and stuff like that. So I guess the conversation or the language we need to build is how we're going to sell it. And how do we package it, and how do we help others to understand why we're doing what we are doing. So, but every time we're talking about those things, there's always costs associated with it. There's nothing, even if we're going to give free stuff, we're buying things to give it away for free. So you're always adding cost to that cup. Doesn't matter what you do. Every time you like these days, sorry, my stupid thing is there. These days, I don't know how to turn it off. Don't ask me. I'll figure out as I move forward in life. But I
hacked
think,
him during a podcast because of it once. That's why he's gone all quick about it.
But what I think it is, every time you want to add a message to the public, you need a team of people, right? You need someone to design it, someone to word it, someone to write the right content, someone to do the right photos. Like, if you really start accumulating all this, it's actually costs. And it's
Which
heavy
goes to
cost.
Tara's point, right? Like, you go through this amazing campaign, you expect you're doing the right thing and you're going to like affect this change in your little ecosystem, and you put it out there and you're ready. Like, you've got everyone ready for the response, and then crickets, nothing one person. And the cost is demoralizing. And you just think, well, I might just go and do what Nestle is doing and just, dessert for dinner. Just give people dessert for dinner. That's what they want.
Yeah. And what I realized, also on the transparency thing, is that I think coffee industry or beverage industry is a very slow maturing industry, right? So for example, a product within the beverage takes years for it to become known versus technology, right? So a technology can take 7 years. Suddenly they sell it for billions of dollars, right? Because they've answered sort of solution. I think for us, we need to take time. Johnny Walker,
Bro,
all the other big. We don't know. It's a beverage industry, but we don't die quickly, That's the difference, right? Like, who is gone in 7 years? I'm just giving an example, like, why, right? So transparency will take time for other people to adopt, but I'll leave other people to talk.
Go, Judy. Before we go to some YouTube comments, go ahead.
Yep. So I think one of the best examples of transparency was started by David Griswold in Sustainable Harvest. He was really one of the first, the pioneers, to bring together producers and roasters in open dialogue. And I've been to several of the Let's Talk Coffees and participated. And it was one of the best experiences where roasters and growers were sitting across from each other and breaking bread and discussing openly their costs and truly understanding it. And so there was larger discussions about it and information, and then the one-on-one conversations. And that truly built the relationships. And I think there just needs to be a lot more of that, because the messaging worked. There wasn't that resistance where you come off from, say, at a 1,200 person producer meeting where everyone's ganging up on each other and we need 5 cents more, and how could you not give that to us? Okay, you didn't have that. So there truly was that understanding about the cost through the value chain. And I think that more need to look at that model because it was something that had worked.
So I'll pose it to you this way. If I go to the supermarket and buy an orange, I'm looking for my favorite kind of orange. I go in there and I'm like, I want a navel orange that's grown in Australia or that's grown in California. As a consumer, I want the best tasting orange that I can afford. And I've tasted a couple of different kinds of oranges, and this is what I know I like. Do consumers care about who grew the orange?
No.
No.
Well,
and I think as an
you know
industry,
what?
we're trying to force them to care about who grew the orange. Are we?
Well, look, the Florida orange industry has made a really big deal in terms of Florida orange juice and caring that it was grown by Florida grove owners. So
Right, but
they
how
were
many
respectful in
Florida
that regard.
growers do you know? How many
Right.
names of producers do you know that have grown oranges in
Well,
Florida?
I cover the orange juice industry, so that's not
Yeah,
a fair
that's right.
question.
Yeah, it's not a fair question to Judith Gaines. Come on now.
That's not a fair
The
question.
Judith Gaines.
Right. No, so we can't do that.
But you get my point, right?
Yeah.
Go, Nicholas.
Hello. Well, this is not Nicholas. It's Cesar. Nicholas is right there.
Oh, sorry. I'm
But,
going off your name, bro.
But
Sorry.
Nicholas and Cesar from it's Nicholas Fund. It's Nicholas and Cesar from Colombian Connection in Sydney. And
Hey, guys.
hi, how are you guys? And well, I think value is something that, as Anna was saying before, it takes time, and I think we need to be active, but as well patient with what we're doing. I compare the specialty coffee industry a lot with my past industry, which was the music industry. And I think that one of the reasons we specialty coffee roasters and bean buyers and suppliers are in this arm of the industry is first because of coffee. And it's the same as musicians when they jump into the train of music, that in music because of the music. And then we decide, do we want to be Maroon 5, Beyonce, and those guys up there in the Grammys, cleaning up every Grammy award? Or do we have to be, or we want to be Led Zeppelin or Metallica? Or we want to be, those guys will transcend, but they don't have as many followers as the other guys, although there's a lot of people that follow them. And it takes time to build up that reputation. It takes time to build up that love, that passion for what we do and deliver quality. And I think that's our mission right now. I don't think we're in a position to fight or to defy people like Starbucks or Nestle or here in Australia, you know, we know the big roasters, Victoria Coffee and those guys, which as well, I laugh when I go to the supermarkets and I see the packaging and they put specialty coffee. And I know deep inside, like, what these guys are doing, like, come on. But at the end of the day, I think, well, it's important to keep putting the message out there. It's like with like having a band, just putting the message out there and keep playing gigs and keep playing in bars and keep listening people, like keep joining these sort of activities and making noise and build up like a cult, like a movement in which we are constantly talking about the importance of transparency, the importance of quality, the importance of the chain, and accepting that we are not going to be, I hope it happens to any of us, you know, be at the top with a huge mega company, because imagine the impact that's going to have to farmers and to communities. That'll be amazing. But the reality is that those strings are being taken by the big corporations, which they work for profit, and their companies are listed on the stock market, and they're in the US 500, in the UK 500, and whatever. I believe that we don't belong to that world. And from my point of view, I'm grateful that I don't belong to that world, because we do this for the love of coffee. We obviously, for us, it's a bit easier to go to Colombia because we are expats from there, but it's amazing to go to the farms and spend time with the guys and see what they're doing, to understand their struggles. And if we keep communicating and passing into this message to our customers, to our friends, it's almost like becoming a like an Amway representative, one of these people that sell stuff all the time. But I think that people listen because coffee is such a beautiful cultural channel to connect. It's not only a drink. I think through history, through thousands of years, it's been a way to connect with people. And civilizations and societies have connect around coffee. So people will listen. And I'm sure that if we talk to 100, 10 will get the message. And slowly, we'll be building up our following, our community. It's depending on us, each one of us. And maybe in the near future, we're going to get to say, okay, guys, let's sit down and we work into a certification or something that will really say, you know what, this is transparent. This is really a specialty coffee. This is what goes going to tell people that we are respecting the channels of production, the channels of supplying, and we are not like the rest. That's what's going to make us different. And although we might not become the majority, but we are going to be a very huge, I want to say a minority, but a very huge group of people that will represent the industry out there in the market. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you for that. I think Deja's got something to respond to that with.
Yeah, this is just adding on what I was thinking. So I work in marketing for 2 different coffee companies, and we've been talking about transparency a lot and navigating what that looks like for each company because they're kind of in different levels of the industry. And so I was going to say one thing that we've been talking about is training your audience or consumer to what to expect from the company. So to add on to what you guys were saying, like just because, I think having the information available and ready is like what I suggest and what we've been doing. And like on our websites, like it's there and it's sitting there and maybe people aren't looking at it yet, but we slowly get questions in. And I think that transparency and stories and stuff like that are becoming more popular. Like the Everlane example from earlier, like I didn't care where I bought my clothes from 5 years ago, but now I care. And so I think that the coffee industry is on the same like wavelength that it's over time, people are going to start caring more. And if you have the information readily available, people are going to be excited. And I was going to say as well, like aligning, someone had made a comment earlier about aligning your values with and finding people who like also have those values is also kind of what we've been doing. And we don't have to reach every person, we just have to reach the ones who share our values. And that's what, from marketing standpoint, that's what we try to do.
Love it. Go ahead, Sergi.
Yeah, I'd like to add on. The funny thing is Deja's sitting right there.
Deja and Sergi are married. So
yeah,
they're right next to
we got
each
2
other.
separate tickets. I didn't know she was going to be home. I didn't know where I was going to be.
It's fabulous.
But I did cancel my appointment to stay on because this conversation has been so good. What I wanted to add to that in general, the conversation, I had a conversation with a U.S. barista champion. I'm going to bring competition to the conversation. Sorry about that. But I have this to give you. But I had this. I feel about these. Exactly. But I had a very good conversation about this with them, and they made a reference to the Got Milk campaign for the dairy industry, and that person said, like, why hasn't the Specialty Coffee Association, yes, the SCA, but all of us who are serving specialty coffee as well, have created a campaign as powerful as the Got Milk campaign? And that's a good question, because I believe, especially in the United States, we have access to that. I mean, there's cafes in California that are owned by celebrities, like mega photographers, like Peter McKinnon is part of a coffee company. But the narrative, the conversation is all about brewing. And then roasting, or majority, let's not say all, but majority is about brewing and kind of the sexy appeal behind the industry. No one is shifting the conversation within the influencer market to talk about what is FOB? Like, I also work behind the bar at a cafe, and I own a roasting company, and most of the folks are not, they have no idea. FOB, like, what does that even mean? They don't even have enough of a reference to ask the right questions. And one of the things that I've been like, I strongly believe every roasting company has to have a podcast. Like, that has to happen. Why? Because there's a longer form conversation going on. I know as a roaster, I don't have all the information or all the content. I'm a very like young business owner, but I have something that I've experienced that may create more dialogue and will also create more question asking. So like, yes, I may not be able to communicate everything effectively, but at least I can start the conversation rolling. So then when the consumer ends up trying to look for that information, they know what to ask. So instead of blocking the flow of information, I'm creating more flow of information. But I don't see a lot of companies doing that. And within that, it's like, yeah, just got a bag of coffee. It's a great label. Communicates nothing. And to a degree, that's okay. But if this branding or if this logo or if this bag is fun and exciting, it should create trust so that this roasting company can have an avenue to communicate more and like more important information, if you know what I mean. So there's so much at play at that. But I also, going back an hour ago when we were talking about whose responsibility it is, man, as a roaster, I'm like, yeah, it's my responsibility. And I want to take on that responsibility with pride and saying, okay, what am I going to communicate? What am I putting on my platform, and who am I reaching?
Yeah, I think we're getting too technical with coffee. It's getting too, sorry for this, maybe too pretentious sometimes, with fancy ass words and all this. Should we do like a more human approach? You know, I think Sergey has a great idea. Like, let's do a podcast. Let's tell the whole story about the producer and all that. I think that's more digestible. It's more interactive. So just throwing, like Lee said, carbon maceration and aerobic. You know, I feel like it's more interesting to the whole entire story of the family, all the workers, the region, all that. I think it's much fun.
You know, I sent my brother some coffee. My brother is someone who loves food. He loves coffee, but he buys his coffee at McCafe every day on the way to work. It breaks my heart, but let's move past that. So I sent him some Stitch coffee, and I called him up and I said to him, what did you think of it? He said, it tasted really good, but I don't understand any of the words that are on the packaging. And I said to him, but they're not like, it's just telling you it's from Ethiopia and where it's from in Ethiopia. He says, why does your industry think I care? And that really hit me. He's like, why do you guys make it so difficult for us? Make me something I want to drink and I will buy it every time. But make me feel stupid because of the words that are on the packaging, and I just feel stupid. And that really hit me. Because what I'm starting to, this conversation has really reinforced this for me. And it's just been such a rich conversation. I think that perhaps what we're saying as a collective here is that the responsibility of maintaining the roaster-producer relationship is between the roaster and the producer. What the discussion is between the roaster and the consumer is based on the consumer's values and what they care about, not what we as the industry should be caring about. I mean, definitely when it goes back to perspective roasters are meeting their consumers at their level. They don't sell their coffee cheap at all. I know, I help them set the business up. It's a really high price ticket item, but it sells. And they don't make the customers feel stupid in any way, shape, or form. They talk to their consumers in a way where the conversation is shared. And I wonder, are we missing the mark as an industry? Are we trying to force feed our consumers some information that they don't care about? Go ahead, Carlos. And Ben, whoever would like to jump in.
No, please, Ben.
You had your hand up first, Carlos. Go for it.
Go,
No,
Carlos.
no, I've spoken too much, Ben. We want to hear you.
Go, Ben.
We're both too polite. Yeah, I think that's a really great insight, Lee, and something that I think has been really clear in like my efforts with different kind of areas of communication around coffee is that I think we really just need to remember why we're doing these different activities, what we're trying to achieve. And, you know, so often I think in the coffee industry, we're so passionate about what we're hands-on doing, you know, and our areas of expertise in terms of the actual coffee itself, that we kind of speak within our own bubble, and we actually make things more complex and complicated for, you know, the consumer or the coffee drinker out the other end. And while there are these two conversations, like you're saying, there's one thing that's a relationship piece between kind of a roaster and a producer. It's kind of a that conversation and that dialogue and that relationship. If on the other conversation, we're trying to increase the value of coffee at a consumer level at that end of the supply chain to try and flow things back upstream, you know, to redistribute things, to create more value in the whole supply chain, right? That I think we need to make it easy, and we need to think about how do we create value for the consumer. And those, I think we need to look outside of, or I think it can be beneficial to look outside of the coffee industry for examples and ideas on that. So looking to other industries like the wine industry or other beverages, and even the example that was given around kind of Everlane. If we think about how consumers are attributing value to certain things about a product, whether it be clothing or where you source like your eggs, you know, there's been obviously a big push on what free range means, and can have lots of debate about how clear that definition is, and that's obviously changing. But you know, people say, well, it's not just eggs, it's free range eggs, because I get the concept of that. That's clear, that's simple, that's easy. I can make a purchasing decision based on that, right? And I think that, you know, all of these conversations we've had about FOB and other pieces of traceability and transparency information, you know, we're all interested in those things because we have a rich understanding of the implications. The general consumer would need to take a lot of educational, we need to, as an industry, provide a lot of foundational education for them to be able to take that information and go, oh, I really value that. And it can be done. But I think that just like with the Everlane kind of example of clothing, it's like we're saying, I want to purchase from this place. Why? Like, what have they done to create value here? It's because, oh, I get a sense that there's ethics there, that there's sustainable production. And we need to think about how do we message that really clearly to a consumer so they can make a quick decision. They're not going to read a 20-page transparency report about every coffee roaster or every cafe that they go to. They're going to go in, make a quick decision, and that speed of decision making, I think we need to always facilitate. So getting to the core of it is kind of, I think, worthwhile, us keeping that clarity in mind.
And it really resonates with this idea that I think the pandemic has, which we haven't even spoken about, which is hilarious given that we've got like 7 minutes to go. But the idea that the pandemic has really influenced consumer behavior and consumer decision making. So too has climate change. And what I think I'm hearing you say there, Ben, is that consumers want to trust us as custodians of the value chain. And as long as they can engage with a brand who they can trust will be good participants in a value chain, they're more likely to hand over their money. And the challenge there is, how do we communicate that we are worthy custodians of the value chain up until the point where we start to hand that over to a consumer, where we entice a consumer into knowing that, right? I think that's what we're trying to get at as a group here in this discussion.
And I don't think that there's any quick or very easy solution to that, because ultimately I think what you end up coming back to, or what I come back to, is things around certification. You know, the badge of a certification, whether you agree with them or not, or want them or not, or use them or not, that those certifications provide a very quick and easy reference and source of truth for a consumer to make a decision. So if it has an organic tick, I know, like, I try and buy organic produce most of the time because I think that that's a good thing, and I look for that certification on products. But I never go into the producer or even the organic certification process, to be honest, and kind of go, well, you know, what exactly are they doing? And like, what exactly are each of these growers kind of doing in terms of the fruit and veg that I buy? Because I don't have time to do that level of research on every single product category that I purchase. So I put my trust as a consumer in that certified message. And I think consumers have done that with, when we use the phrase specialty coffee out at the other end, but as we're all experiencing, there's no certification of that, obviously, from a consumer end. And so it can be co-opted and washed out. And so I think there's some interesting challenges there for us as an industry in order to, how do we give confidence to the consumer to make quick purchasing decisions, attribute value, and go forward with that. And I think conversations like this, where we can maybe centralize the language that we use, so we're all talking about this big picture of wanting to make sure that producers are achieving kind of positive financial outcomes, right? Sustainability from a producer side of things. How can we as an industry work together to encapsulate that idea and communicate it and kind of build momentum around that message?
Yeah. Go ahead, Carlos, please.
I think we're almost out of time, but to reference some of the things that Ben said, I think it's two words: trust and adding value. And I also believe that sometimes we make a mistake. We need to keep two things separate. One is the interaction between growers and roasters and importers, which is always going to be technical. We all want to know what and how and get a good understanding. And then the other side is, once are roasted by these products, how do they communicate better to customers? And this is where I believe there's so much room for improvement, because I don't think the technical sides are going to go away. We're every day going to make innovations, different things, and we're going to have to communicate that to roasters. But roasters, where I feel we can improve a lot is, I always, for example, in my info cards, when we sell coffees, one side is the technical, the other side is the human side. And I believe that is the most important, and that is the one that is going to get people interested. Also, the other thing, I always think, for example, I'm very visual. If I go to a supermarket and I buy wine, I don't know much, but so I buy the coolest sticker I find. But what I can tell you is, if I drink it and I don't like it, I'm never going to purchase it again. So you can add a lot of value with the marketing and the way you present things, but that value is either going to be maintained or lost at the first sip. So yes, they may have, I speak to a lot of micro roasteries. These guys throw out so much value in marketing and they get all these things out. I said, well, what about the taste and what about the experience? Me, myself, I compare it to wine or anything else that I don't know much about, but I can definitely know what I like and dislike. Perhaps I don't have the technical side to explain why, but I, in my mind, said yes or no. And then that becomes a repetitive purchase or simply never again.
And it comes back to the whole taste is subjective, and what you like, somebody else may not like, and what they like, you may not like.
I just add one thing on the
please go ahead.
For Ben free range. There was an ad for Lavazza. I think they call it responsible coffee.
Oh.
So they changed specialty coffee to responsible coffee. It's quite interesting, the name change. Obviously, they did a lot of research for them to come up with an ad that took specialty coffee out and call it responsible coffee, which is what Ben said. It's so easy. It's simple terminology. There was responsibility behind it. That was an interesting thought.
And to add to that, I follow the executive director, someone extremely high up in coffee in Nestle. and he was meeting with Kamala Harris because Kamala Harris has invited top agricultural companies to figure out the issue of how they can improve agriculture across Latin America so that they can stifle the immigration at the US border. Now, Nestle is being invited to participate in that conversation with the government. That further then extends their responsible perspective of the way that they engage in things, and it sends a message that further compounds our issues with regards to the way that we market coffee and the branding of coffee. So if now Nestle is being brought in to have a part of the political discussion, how do we then package that as another layer of the relationship between the consumer and the producer? There's so many complexities to the layers of that I think we need to start getting unified as an industry, however we define that industry, whether it's a specialty coffee industry, whether it's the coffee industry, whatever it is. We need to start coming together and having a unified discussion around what the brand of coffee is and what it is not. What does it represent? How do we start messaging to consumers what they should be caring about at a time where consumer behavior is changing rapidly? Any final comments or questions or anything like that we could throw out there?
Something I actually wanted to say is that a lot of what we're bringing up is differentiation between the Nestle's and specialty coffee. And the question that is posed is what needs to change in the coffee industry. It's not necessarily narrowed to the specialty coffee industry. And if it does come down to how do we approach these other companies to bring them into these conversations we're having, well, how can we do that? And because ultimately they have a lot more sway than a micro roaster in Southern California or in Melbourne or, anywhere else around the world. They have a much greater impact. And so I was thinking about that a lot throughout the last, 30 minutes or so, especially because Lee, in one of our meetings, I slipped on the question. I said, what needs to change in the specialty coffee industry? And you were like, no, it's just the coffee industry. I was like, oh, right. I need to make sure I don't slip up and say that. And so I think that we also, in specialty coffee, whatever that might mean, however we define it, we are quick to exclude the big guys, and we're quick to also kind of dismiss the business that they're doing. And so how can we possibly bridge that and build a conversation with them? Because at the end of the day, a single decision they make, a single change they make will have much greater impact than what most of our little individual businesses that we work in or that we own could possibly have.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that we need to look at where our mutual interests align and where the mutual impacts kind of flow on. And I think there are things that are pre-commercial versus specialty conversation that are just like the coffee industry as a whole. And we also know that commercial coffee and kind of Judith has probably had is much more aware, and this is in her world more than maybe some of ours in like a specialty coffee niche, is that the commercial coffee world, the commodity coffee world, has a huge flow-on impact, whether we like it or not, into the kind of the baseline or the space that we're all having this specialty coffee conversation in, and the market kind of influences there. So I completely agree. We can collectively bring these kind of different conversations together in that almost that pre-competitive space, and then look at like how are we then differentiating between these two different offerings that there's still a demand for out there. There's the commodity coffee, huge demand for it from a consumer point of view. People want it. We all want to make sure that even that kind of level of commodity is sustainable and is doing no harm to planet or people. I think that's kind of what I think the specialty coffee niche would love to see happen down into that space. And if we can affect that change, all the better, and it probably strengthens this flow upstream to this specialty coffee niche.
Carlos, we're going to give you the last word.
Yeah, as a final note, I wanted to say that we all many times think that the big companies are not listening, but this has accentuated a lot more in the last 2 or 3 years. We as exporters and importers speak to all different type of roasters, very little to very large. And in the last year and a half, I've had many conversations with really big roasters about wanting to work with us or wanting to work with people that can add value to, so that they can tick boxes. So to everyone, this is happening. They are listening, they're changing their habits, perhaps not everything, but they are definitely catching up with these things. They're putting a lot of attention, and you'll see most of them starting to start lines of products that are going to be sustainable, that they're going to be paying more. My message is they're listening, and not all of them, but some of them, and they want to change. Obviously, monsters, they take a lot more time. I'm not speaking in behalf of them, but I do talk to many of them, and they want to change. They just need time, and the industry, as we talk and elaborate all these things, they're probably going to start changing with us as well.
I hope so. Guys, this has been a thrilling conversation, really fabulous. Thanks again to CoffeeNet and Baratza and Los Pirineos for making this event possible. And thank you for showing up, everybody. This has been a really engaging discussion, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you'll come back next time that we do this. And if you speak any of the other languages that we offer for this Global Coffee Town Hall, this inaugural Global Coffee Town Hall, please consider signing up and engaging in the discussion in those languages. I hope you've all enjoyed yourself and got a lot out of it. Massive thank you to Madeleine for co-moderating this with me. But thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lee. I also want to say this video lives on YouTube. And so if you want to continue the conversation there, the comment section will always be there. And so please do continue the conversation there.
Awesome. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.